Okay, I'm going to let in all of our online folks. Okay, Christine, you're muted, but you can unmute yourself. All right. Okay, and then, hey, Marty. So,
Hey, cousin.
so we have a little technical difficulties, but you know, as to be expected for the first panel. But we are very excited to share with you guys online and in person this fantastic work that the Indiana Dunes Tourism Group has been doing and Christine has been spearheading. And we're really excited about it. We're gonna see if we can adapt it, but Christine, feel free to go ahead. Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity. This is really exciting to be able to start sharing what we've been working on. I just bumped into one of our partners yesterday at an event, and she reminded me that it had been 4 years since we started this project. So it's been a long partnership and a really productive partnership, and a lot of good things have come out of it besides just this Indiana Dunes Indigenous Cultural Trail. So my name is Christine Livingston, and I'm the project lead, and I'm also the assistant director at Indiana Dunes Tourism. So for those of you who are, you know, you're a little bit up around the other side of the lake, we're right on the southern tip of Lake Michigan, in between Michigan City and Gary, along the shoreline, about 15 miles of beach along the Lake Michigan shoreline called the Indiana Dunes, which consists of a state park and a national park. So, so we're working on this indigenous cultural trail that has morphed and changed over time and really evolved into something that we're all pretty excited about. This is our official logo that you're looking at here. If you can see my screen, I'm curious, can you see my pointer? Okay. So this was the logo was very carefully thought through and cleared with the tribes and talked about a lot and changed, and we all feel really good about it. So that's exciting that we've got that much accomplished. But what I'd like to do today is go through the trail concept, partnerships that have evolved over the years, and then actions that we've completed to date. Engineering and renderings, share a little bit about what this is going to look like. Again, this is just the very beginning of the trail, so it's not in place yet. Give a funding update, and then talk a little bit about next steps. So with that, and please interrupt. It's hard for me to monitor the chat and talk at the same time, so I don't know if I even have the chat visible. Here we go. I'll try and pay attention to that, but also, you know, I don't know if you're on mute, but I'm happy to stop at any point if anyone has any questions.
We'll speak up.
Good. Okay, perfect. I'm going to give a little bit of background information because I know some of you probably aren't that well acquainted with the lay of the land down here in Indiana. The Indiana Dunes Visitor Center, which is where my office is, which is a partnership between the National Park and Indiana Dunes Tourism, which is a county agency, is essentially the gateway to the Indiana Dunes National and State Parks. So the National Park is actually surrounding a smaller state park, which is in the center of the Indiana Dunes area, which is super confusing to everybody. But it is just one destination. Everything is connected. It's just a national park and a state park. And the Indiana Dunes Welcome Center is the gateway to that area. So we sit on just under 5 acres, and these are some images of the visitor center and the grounds. We have beautiful grounds. And we also have 15 acres of property that is owned by the Indiana Dunes National Park surrounding our 5 acres. So in total, we've got 20 acres there. We serve a lot of visitors and also residents. After becoming a national park a couple of years ago, the visitation has really been on the rise. You can imagine when a park goes to that status, it gets on everybody's bucket list. So this slide is actually a little old. We had about 130,000 visitors and residents annually. So in that building right there, we could have up to 6,000 people go through that building in one day. Just to give you an idea of the amount of traffic, because it's important, because we feel like we've really set ourselves up for success as we develop this trail, we have a built-in audience of a large number of people that come through to see the park that usually come through our visitor center. So these are our partners, and this is actually a photo taken at the Language Center in Dowagiac. The Pokagon Band of Potawatomi have been very involved in the project, as have Miami Tribe of Oklahoma, and then Indiana Dunes Tourism, which is my organization, primarily marketing organization that complements the efforts of the state park and national park. And then the national park has been also heavily involved. The national park was initially the organization that reached out to all the tribes that have been in our area. I believe there were 9. And the 2 tribes that have stayed with the project are the Potawatomi and Oklahoma. Others were interested, but just didn't have the bandwidth necessarily to stay engaged at the level that those 2 tribes did. So it's been evolving over a period of 4 years. Initially, we had the idea to put something in that people could enjoy besides just having a visitor center. We wanted to create a destination experience in and of itself at the visitor center. And initially, that whole idea came about because of a donation of the 15 acres behind our property. It's got some diverse habitats back there. Some of it's prairie, some of it's woodland, and being that it's connected to our property, we thought, well, some kind of a trail. And it just started to grow and more from that idea. We have a lot of diversity on our property because we've done a lot of native plantings, and we've had people comment on that a lot, and just evolved into a partnership with the tribes and into this concept of doing an Indiana Dunes indigenous cultural trail. We don't have all the concepts completely fully fleshed out. We're still working on getting large amounts of funding from the national park for their segment of the trail, which is the 15 acres. Ours is the first phase. So mostly what I'll be talking about today is the 5-acre parcel that's adjacent to the national park. So that's another phase that we'll be getting to next year. So actions completed to date are the trail name and logo. We have meetings and with all the partners. We rotated our meetings this was before COVID. When we started, we rotated our meetings to the different partnership areas so that we could kind of learn about each other and each other's mission, and, you know, just build the partnership and trust. So this was the logo actually took us quite a while to get to, but I'd like to show that first because it really does show the concept of the trail, I think, in a graphic way, and incorporated the design on the turtle shell in a way that really embodies kind of what our vision is for the trail. So what's here, the second thing we did was we had botanical site surveys that were to just identify what species are on our site. You know, I forgot to clarify how much time I have. How much time do I have? I want to be mindful, keep this timely for everyone.
This is Marty. I think you said 7 hours.
I could talk about this a long time, but I don't know if I could do it for 7 hours.
You got plenty of time. You got like, I think you got like almost an hour.
Oh, okay. All right. Then I don't need to rush.
We're supposed to end at 2. So if you leave like an extra 15 minutes, probably got 30 minutes or so. Which
Okay, perfect.
enough.
All right. We're good then.
Thanks, Marty, for the help.
Because I have a couple of stories in here that I think are interesting to tell. One of the stories at this point that I share, if I have time, is just that when we initially got everybody together, and it was national park and both tribes, and none of us really knew each other that well, and we were just kind of getting the lay of the land and starting to understand each other's vision and mission. We were talking about, like, what could this even look like? And the Park Service, being the Park Service, was saying, well, you know, we can plant, you know, things out on the property that would be lend to storytelling about medicinal plants and, you know, edible plants, and storytelling about what is useful and what the tribes have used over time and what they still use today. And we could plant those things out there. And it was Jason we saw actually that said, well, how about we just like look and see what's out there first before we start talking about what we need to plant, which I thought was so poignant in the moment, because we had no idea really what was out there yet. And I was really glad that he said that, because it was sort of the beginning of this whole thing. It's like, just do an evaluation, assess what's out there. So we got volunteers together from nonprofit groups that had expertise in plant ID, and the tribes came and we did a smudge, and we had this whole event where we went out and basically just looked around and took pictures. So a lot of the pictures in this presentation I took during that botanization, and it was just a great way to start the whole project, just what's out there that lends itself. And then of course we could plant things out there if we need to, but what we found was that there's actually a lot of great stuff out there that lends itself to storytelling. So this is just some image of the group sessions that we had. We really wanted to develop these partnerships and take our time to generate story themes that share how the indigenous cultures connect to the Indiana Dunes and Lake Michigan. So we also engaged Holmen Institute of Technology. That's an Indiana school that focuses a lot on engineering, and they offered the students up to do a student final project and put together some concepts for us. So this was a huge boost for the project and got us really up and running with very little investment. And this is a shot of the students presenting at the language building when we had those concepts ready to share with the group. And again, they just put together initial concepts. They didn't do a deep dive into a lot of the details, but it gave us a starting point. So this is another picture of the collaboration where we were getting input for the Holmen students to refine those plans. Again, this meeting was in Dowagiac, and there was a really good turnout at this meeting from the Potawatomi. So we got a lot of great feedback from some of the elders and people who have just a lot of experience that, you know, knew a lot about the Lake Michigan connection and that sort of thing. So it was a really great way to get everyone acquainted with how we might be able to pull all these story themes together. Then this is another shot of the tour that we took of the facility there, and with support from both tribes. NERPC is the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission here, National Park, South Shore Arts, Westchester Museum, and other letters of support. We started to obtain funding, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. These are some earlier figures. I've got a slide that's more updated, but we have been putting a lot of energy into getting fundraising accomplished. So I had time today, so I threw in these slides of the time that we were out there evaluating the site and looking to see what was already there. So just to share, these are some slides of the woodland area as the prairie turns into woodland area. There's some restored areas in the Indiana Dunes Visitor Center. When we built the Visitor Center, because we knew we had a partnership with the National Park, we put a lot of time and energy into making sure that the plantings and landscaping included a lot of natives. Originally, the plan was to just throw a bunch of seeds out there. That did not work very well. So we ended up having to actually spend some money on plugs and putting more energy into that landscaping. But 12 years later, it's really an amazing landscape. This just gives you an idea of how everything lays out. So you can see our little piece in the corner here. That's the visitor center. That's the roughly 5 acres. And then directly north from there is the prairie area. And a lot of this is just old farm fields. It's been empty for a long time. You could kind of see a tree line here. This has got a really large oak tree in it that we were speculating might even be a marker tree. We're trying to do some research on that. And then as you go over here, there's woodland area where there's a little bit more fragile, a little bit more wet, a lot of fungi and wildflowers. So that just gives you the overall lay of the land. This road back here never happened because the donation that the National Park received from the developer made this it's just an easement now for utilities. So that'll probably be part of the trail as this project evolves, but that's not actually a road, even though it looks like a road here. This is the Indiana Dunes Visitor Center grounds. So as I said, just a lot of diversity, a lot of prairie. We have water features around the visitor center, like rain gardens and bioswales, and we have a 2-stage ditch to create floodplain to mimic nature and improve the infiltration of rainwater rather than have it run into Dunes Creek, which runs through the corner of our property and discharges into the Lake Michigan swimming beach. So it's a really important piece of land and an important place to protect water quality. And we've done a really good job with that. And now we just want to take that story and really take it to the next level. These are just some slides, again, because I had time with you guys today. I thought I'd share a little bit about how the visitor center came together. This is our group of volunteers installing the rain garden. This was probably, I don't know, about 10 years ago, probably now. And then on the lower right is, how it's very beautiful. That's actually an old picture. So the rain garden is gorgeous, but it's interesting when we first worked with the group that was putting this rain garden in, our board of directors was very skeptical about this and just uncertain that it was initially slated to be a sand dune. And we decided we would go with this, water feature, and looked like a puddle of mud. Everybody was very concerned that it was going to be awful. And it was a puddle of mud for a while until we got the plants in, because even though we're in the Indiana Dunes, for some reason that site has a lot of clay. So nothing's infiltrating. We did this planting with this group, and it was amazing. Within, these are just small plugs, but within probably a month or so, the rainwater was being filtered, and it just started to really come together quickly. So it was thankful that everyone could then get on board and feel confident that we had put in a feature that would not only be protecting water quality, but also a teachable moment where we could share how, how important rain gardens are and how residents can also use that design in their own yard. This is a little bit more of a technical practice that we put in. It's a serpentine ditch to slow water down as it leaves the site. So you can kind of see here the way that it snakes around. And then this is showing the way we opened up the floodplain. So if I don't know exactly what your level of expertise is on this, but in water drainage and stormwater runoff, you really don't want to have those really narrow channels where the water just picks up sediment and tears at the edges and then takes that sediment out to the receiving body of water. Rather, we want to create a floodplain where our native species can grow and the water can spread out a little bit more and be and pollutants and sediment can be taken up by the plants that naturally would grow in that area. So we created this 2-stage ditch to mimic nature and create a little mini floodplain. So I'm going into detail just because I have time. This is just some really fun stuff we did when we put the visitor center in. This is the Dunes Creek entering into the swimming beach at the state park. So again, just demonstrating this is a really critical piece of property that affects the swimming beach and a great opportunity for us to talk about water quality, how we protect water quality, which was just a great segue into the trail that we're developing with the tribes and telling that story with the addition of the tribal perspective and the indigenous people's perspective. This is just some slides when we were out looking at the prairie area. There are pioneer plant species, wetland animals. They have beneficial mound ants out there, crayfish, and other variety of animals. I don't know if you can see here, but this is the oak tree I was talking about. And this is actually me standing right next to it. So it gives you an idea of scale. It's a pretty large tree. And just some sandhill crane that were out there. And these are the mound ants and the rattlesnake master, just a lot of good stuff that we found, and really no planting necessary. We found lots of things that we'll be able to talk about when we get to the point of putting our messaging together for the trail. This is the wooded area. As I mentioned, there's a lot of fungi out there, amazing mushrooms, a lot of wildflowers and moss, a little bit darker, a little bit wetter. And this was a concept that the Rose Holmen students put together. And I use this slide to talk a little bit about the process that we've gone through as a team, because the Rose Holmen students were working a little bit in a vacuum. They're students and they're just putting together the ground samples and just some concepts. And when they brought this to the tribes, there was a very strong reaction to the longhouses that were put in as part of the design. Different tribes have different uses for longhouses, and in this particular situation, in the Potawatomi culture, they're more of a sacred space rather than a community shared space. So when we were at the Language Center, we had very strong reaction against the longhouses, and we've since removed them. But I do leave this slide in because it demonstrates the process that we're following is really driven by the tribes, and their input is critical at every step. So they've approved every aspect of what we've done, the signage, the land acknowledgement. They've agreed to have their seals and logos flown at the visitor center on flags next to our flag. So we've come a long way at building trust. And this is just an idea of what the trail might look like, but we haven't actually finished the engineering. So that's just a little story about that. We have 5 themes that have emerged from these group sessions that happened over the course of the years. Water is the one that I've been talking about here this morning. This is our story. I mean, we're right next to Lake Michigan. We have a creek running through, and we've developed signage that we incorporated different translations for different terms, but I'll show you those in a couple minutes. Other themes are sustainability, seasons and cycles, connection, and then living things that teach us, which will be plants and animals. So at this point in the development of the trail, we're really at the place where we're going to start working on sustainability and adaptation. National Park got some funding to hire, and I can't remember what his exact title is, but basically a person that writes programming at the fourth to 7th grade level, so that we can have field trips to the site that will incorporate the theme of sustainability, the indigenous story, and have it in the format that teachers can come and bring their kids to the visitor center for field trips to use the site for that purpose. So that's pretty exciting. We just got that approved. He starts next month, and we're looking forward to working with him and getting those stories a little bit better refined. This is just a little bit about how we have been learning to communicate with each other. So the groups that are involved in this, the 4 groups: National Park, Indiana Dunes Tourism being a marketing organization, a little more economic development focused, and then the 2 tribes. Initially, those groups were, our communication styles are different, our cultures are different. So it's been a process of really learning how to communicate effectively. Western worldview tends to be very linear. You go in with an agenda, you have a timeline, you've got deliverables, and it's just kind of the way the project started. But then as soon as we started working with the tribes, we realized like, this is going to be a more organic process. We need to let things sort of evolve, let trust build, let stories kind of just come forth as they do. It's not the kind of thing that you can have a rigid agenda. So I use this slide to talk about, I feel like this project has had a ripple effect, because the group, and not only the group, but each of the group's boards and respective people within their organization have learned a lot working together. And I personally have learned a lot about just, indigenous culture, communication, and the things that are appropriate, inappropriate. So it's been a journey for all of us. And I think that's one of the ripple effects of working on a project like this. And that's just been a really interesting thing to experience. We took a field trip up to Field Museum when their team realized that their indigenous displays were a little bit dated and possibly inaccurate. So they started putting some funding into updating those. And again, this was 4 years ago. So they've come a long way. I think that for the most part, those exhibits have been updated. But at the time, our group went up to look and, just brainstorm with the Field Museum staff. They have a lot of expertise and a great team. And so we walked through the exhibit and talked to them about our plans, and they gave us great input. But it was very interesting walking through that exhibitry with the tribes, where they could point out the things that were inaccurate. And it's just been a real learning experience, I think, for all of us. This is an example of one of the signs. We, as I said, worked with both tribes to get the logos incorporated into this. This template is actually the official national park template, which is why it has that black bar at the top. We opted to go with this template because the 15 acres will have the official Indiana Dunes National Park signs incorporated throughout. So we just want it to be consistent. So these will be the templates throughout the entire thing. So as you walk through the trail, it'll be a consistent look and consistent style. And you can see here, I've circled some of the translations, and we have different facts throughout these signs. So this is kind of the overarching sign. And then we have more detailed signs. This is the one that's just at the foot of the rain garden to talk about that feature. And then have the translations of the key messaging in that sign. And then this is our vegetated swale. And I'm not expecting anyone to be able to read this. I'm just showing you graphically kind of how we brought this all together in the form of these signs that are, as of 2 weeks ago, just got installed at our site. So we're really excited to have this finally start coming into reality. This is the stream in the ditch that I described. And this picture here is actually Dunes Creek entering into Lake Michigan. I'm not going to get into the weeds on this. This is our signage plan. Essentially, we have a phased approach. The yellow signs are the ones that were just installed. Next phase is the orange signs, and we kind of have them clustered by theme. So without going into a lot of detail there, that's still in the works, but hopefully coming soon. This is our land acknowledgement. When we were at the Field Museum, we had never heard, none of us had ever heard of a land acknowledgement. Actually, at that time, seemingly anyway, when we were having the conversation, no one was familiar with it. It was relatively new. And I guess since that time, it's become much more commonplace to have these and also have statements read before certain types of events. But at the time, it was news to us. And so we really loved the idea. But Field Museum had a plastic piece that just didn't seem like, we wanted to be a little bit more natural. So I did a lot of research on this and looked into having it be, made out of copper or wood or carved into stone. And this is where we landed. This is actually bronze, and it's like a relief. So the writing will stand up, and then we're going to mount it on a piece outside the front of the visitor center. We really didn't want to just have a plaque on the wall. No one really pays attention to that. We really want this to be prominent. We talked about maybe putting it right into the center round piece at the visitor center as people walk in, but there were thoughts that maybe people shouldn't be actually walking on it. So we're going to elevate it and have it on a little round platform. And this is actually the land acknowledgement we agreed on. I thought maybe I'd show it to you in a larger font so you could read it if you wanted to take the time to do that. Does anyone have any questions at this point? So this is a cool thing we have on our site.